Good morning, Broncos fans, and welcome to Legends of Mile High. I'm Thomas Hall, your host, and today we're going to be talking about the Pro Football Hall of Fame and how the selector saw fit not to include any Denver Broncos. But more than that, I really want to talk about the appearance of the selection process as well. I mean, if you look at the wide receivers, so to speak, it is almost a literal list of the receiving yards leaders that aren't in the Hall of Fame who are eligible. I mean, you go down the list, it's like, oh, Steve Smith's number 8. He's not in. Oh, we got Anquan Bolden. He's 14th on the list. He's not in. Everybody else is in between him. Torrey Holt, then Reggie Wayne, all of these guys. The only one that isn't is Hines Ward, who's 27th on that list, and leapfrog Brandon Marshall and Jimmy Smith. They've wanted him in for a long time. They seem to have wanted him in from the beginning. But to me, that's an appearance of not really caring about the process. It's like it's literally easier to look down a career stats list than it is to dig in to players from other positions like interior offensive line and interior defensive line. And for an example, I'm no Minnesota Vikings fan, but Kevin Williams is not in the semifinal list. And he was one of the most dominant, if not the most dominant defensive tackles for 4 years and probably 5 out of 6 years. He got 5 All-Pro First Team awards, been on the 2000s All-Decade team. He has more First Team All-Pro awards than 2 of the running backs, Taylor and Lionel Taylor, and I can't even remember who else is on the list that I was thinking of. Ricky Waters, and 2 of the wide receivers, Hines Ward and Anquan Bolden. He has more first team All-Pros than them combined, yet he didn't make the list. To me, that just means that maybe some of the selectors really aren't putting enough effort into this actual selection process. And my feeling is the Pro Football Hall of Fame is the most prestigious award that players can get. And if you're a selector, it's a great honor to be a selector, right? So you should treat it as such. And this gives off the impression that some of the folks didn't even really care to look into some of these other players. It was just easier. And that's the impression to get. Now, whether they did or they didn't, I don't know. And that's not even to say that some of these folks have agendas, because they do. I mean, we've seen it. Last year, there was an agenda because one of the New York Giants had a book written about him. And so there's a lot of perceptions out there that they're just really overlooking some of these players that are deserving. And I'm going to get to the Broncos. Don't worry about that. There were several Broncos on the nominee list that didn't make it. And I mean, that's a shame. It really is a shame. Now, I will say it is incredible that Randy Gradishar is finally on that list. He looks like he's going to get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. All that's left is a rubber stamp. So I don't want to belittle the process too much, because, you know, they did finally, after all these years, elect a deserving Bronco to the Hall of Fame in Randy Gradishar. But there are some deserving Broncos that aren't even getting a sniff at the Hall of Fame. But before I jump into that, let's say hello to some of the folks in the chat this morning. Got David Yunkin coming in bright and early. Thank you, David, for being here. Says, Thomas, I hope you feel better. It seems to me that the Broncos don't get into the Hall of Fame as much as other players. Well, I am starting to feel better, so thank you for that, David. I was pretty sick there for a while. So COVID got me. I'm still kind of recovering, very tired. But anyway, thank you for that. I'll tell you, over the last, 15, 20 years, I think the Broncos have gotten their fair share in. If you look at a lot of the last decade, there's several Broncos have gotten in that are true Broncos, and then other players who played for the Denver Broncos also have gotten in. So I think more recently the selectors are starting to, look at some of these Broncos players that were great. The problem was they ignored them for a long time. And the first Bronco to make the Hall of Fame was John Elway in 2004. Now, they had gone to 6 Super Bowls, winning 2 from 70s, 80s, 90s before anyone got in. That, to me, tells me that they were ignored. I mean, Randy Gradishar, Louis Wright, Riley Odoms, who isn't even talked about, who has a better resume than Charlie Sanders, never really gets time. So there's a lot. Carl Mecklenburg, there's a lot that got left out or pushed to the senior pool. So I do have a problem with the past selectors who did just kind of overlook the Broncos altogether. But I think they're coming around. Except for this year, they seem to have just forgotten about the Denver Broncos altogether. But thanks for coming in, David. Appreciate it. And Jeremy Sean coming in. Thank you, sir. Morning, Thomas. Bummer about the Hall of Fame. Let's take our frustrations out on the Texans. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that game. This is a huge game. This Texans game, I don't want to get off track on the Hall of Fame stuff, but this Texans game, if the Broncos can win this, they pretty much control their playoff fate, really. I mean, they'll have a win over Cleveland, a win over the Texans, and a win over the Buffalo Bills, all teams who, if they end up with the same record, they're going to leapfrog, which is that's a great place to be in. So let's hope they do beat the Texans. I think they will. Quentin Caldwell coming in saying, good morning to everyone. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. And of course, Michael Ronquillo being here saying, good morning, Thomas on Legends of Mile High. Go Broncos. Thank you for the support. As always, Michael coming in with Facebook stars. I'm trying to get into Facebook here, which is, I'm assuming is Facebook stars, because you always give the support and we really appreciate it. I feel like I can't get into, all right, here we go. I'm in finally. I got into Facebook. I am not a Facebook user, which is, most people are, but man, it sure is hard for me to navigate through there sometimes. But thank you, Michael, for being here. Thank you for the support. I really appreciate it. And then Jeremy's coming in here saying, I heard the Steelers' backup water distributor got a Hall of Fame nomination. Yeah, yeah, it does see. I mean, I can't fault them too much, right? I mean, the Steelers had a very dominant team for a long time, and they still are, one of those teams that are rarely bad. So they have good players, and they had, 4 Super Bowls, back in the day, 4 Super Bowl victories. It's hard not to keep them out. But for example, Hines Ward, to me, seems like a stretch. Like it's more, oh, he's a Steeler, Hines Ward, the Steelers are a legendary team and everything. I don't think he was even the best receiver ever in his even conference, let alone the NFL at any point in his career. So it's a bit curious to me why they have had this real push to get him in. He's been a semifinals for 8 years straight. And when someone's someone that's a semifinalist that long ends up getting in the Hall of Fame, leapfrogging others. And to me, I would take Kevin Williams, Tom Nalen, and Jeff Saturday, interior defensive and offensive linemen over him in a heartbeat. They were better at their position by far and were one of the best at the time that they played at their position and have just as many accolades or more than he does. So I just don't understand the push for Hines Ward, but thanks, Jeremy, for that. We got Gary Fire coming in this morning. Go Broncos. Thank you for being here. And of course, Michael Ronquillo is coming in with the Tom Nalen for the NFL Hall of Fame. Yeah, thanks for that. It's a bummer that he's off the list. Man, I'm really disappointed because they don't even think about him, right? They don't even really look at all of his, contributions to the NFL, to the history of the NFL with his own blocking scheme and those churning out those running back 1,000-yard rushers. So I'm disappointed, Michael, but thanks for coming in with that. Appreciate it. And Keith Brugman's coming in to say, would be remiss if I didn't come in here and pay my respects to Harold Hasselbeck. Rest in peace. Yeah, we talked about him a little on the Wednesday show. It's a bummer to hear that he, passed away at an early age, just a few years older than me. Seems like a great guy. I've never met him, but, very, very influential role player in the Broncos back-to-back Super Bowls. I think he spoke like 3 languages. I mean, it's a shame that, some people lose their lives very early. So rest in peace. Thank you for that, Keith. We got Kevin coming in here. Just wanted to throw it out there. If anybody knows if they're going to be going to a Broncos Mile High tailgate or anything for the Lions game, I don't know. I hopefully the Lions folks let Broncos tailgate. I'm sure they do, but I don't know. So hopefully the community sees that and lets you know. Thanks, Kevin. All right. We got Joey LaGuardia coming in from Facebook. Thank you so much, Joey, for coming in saying Denver was considered a cow town and was looked down at. That's what I heard on a show I watched. So we get the shaft on Hall of Fame inductees. Well, that's part of it. Yeah. But, back in the day. So today, the last 15 years, you can watch games. DirecTV's had Sunday Night Football Ticket for years. You can watch all the games if you so choose. But back in the day, a lot of these Hall of Fame selectors weren't seeing the Denver Broncos. It's a small market. They were mostly on the East Coast. They were watching the Giants, the Jets, the Steelers, all of those teams. And, they were kind of not paying attention to the Denver Broncos, really. I mean, it's not that they didn't know about them. It's not that they don't think that they're great players, but they never really watched how great they really were on the field day in and day out. So that, you have a very good point there, Joey. It's a bummer that, that they don't go back and really research them. I think some of the selectors really do go back and watch and they research, they talk to historians, but I think that's a smaller number than they like to, than the perception is that they like to put out there. I think there's some that just, like I said, probably just looked down the receiving yards list and said, yep, let's put those guys in and I'm going to vote for them, and don't put a ton of effort. I mean, think about it, they have jobs. They have to do a lot of other work, but still, it's an honor. It just has a perception of not putting in the effort and the time to really look at it. I mean, and to me, Kevin Williams is one of the big ones. Like, aren't you going to take a look at Kevin Williams at some point? I mean, holy mackerel. And then Joy's coming back in with they should increase the amount of inductees to catch up to the more modern day players. Yeah, I think they should. I wish that, I mean, they're doing it there with the senior process they did, right? They've added for a few years, added a few more players to that list to kind of catch up. That backlog, they would have to do something pretty large to catch up. And they tried to with the Centennial class, but I think they some of the selectors hijacked that Centennial class and kind of took over what the original, what I would say, plan for that class was. that was supposed to try and catch up some of them. I don't really consider, I don't think they should expand it. I don't want more Hall of Famers in. I want the right players to get into the Hall of Fame. And right now, I don't think the right players are even being talked about, right? Like for centers, for instance, you have to go back to Jim Langier. You have to go way back to find the last 5 centers that got in the Hall of Fame, where you only have to go back to Marvin Harrison to get the last 5 wide receivers that made it in the Hall of Fame. So to me, it's the right players. And that's why I'm talking a little bit about the selectors, is that maybe their process needs to change, how they go about selecting these players to get into the semifinals, so that you can have the conversation about them. We don't need more wide receivers in the Hall of Fame. We got tons of Hall of Famers at that position in the Hall of Fame, and running backs too. We don't need more of those. What we need is more centers, more interior, guards, more interior defensive linemen, those forgotten about players. Let's have conversations about, let's get those folks nominated so you can discuss their merits. I mean, discussing the merits of Hines Ward and Anquan Boldin, who are barely the top 30 wide receivers of all time, probably even less, or, even Eddie George or Fred Taylor, who are probably 40th or higher of all time. Why are we discussing those merits when you've got, people like Tom Nalen and Jeff Saturday and again, Kevin Williams, who are arguably top 15 when you talk about, the ability to get in the Hall of Fame, right? Top 15 or top 10. I mean, Kevin Williams, if you look, I mean, Pro Football Reference has a Hall of Fame monitor. He's he's number 8 on, it's supposed to judge their merits to get in the Hall of Fame, and he's number 8. I don't understand why we've got to talk about, some of the, non-impactful players for the Hall of Fame. So yeah, thank you for that. This needs to be the right players for sure. And Jeremy Sean's coming in. The fact that Mike Shanahan isn't in, although he's clearly the most influential offensive mind in the current NFL, tells you it's more than football to the voters. That's possible. I think that, to me, that they put Bill Cowher in the Hall of Fame in that Centennial class right away and have kind of ignored Mike Shanahan, I think he'll get in. I think he'll get in relatively soon. But that to me was the what really kind of solidified it. If they were going to make Mike Shanahan wait, why did they usher in Bill Cowher so quickly? You know that's because Shanahan's got a better resume than Bill Cowher. I mean, I think maybe the fact that he went to Washington and didn't do great there maybe hurt him a little. If he had just retired after, or just left and didn't come back to the NFL after he left the Broncos, I think he probably has had a better chance. But still, it's like Bill Cowher got ushered in right away, a Pittsburgh Steeler. Oh, Mike Shanahan, well, we'll make you wait. And not don't get me wrong. I think the last couple of coaches that have got in, or contributors or whatever you want to call them now, I think they're very, very, very deserving and should be in the Hall of Fame. Should have been in a lot longer. So now we're just probably putting Mike Shanahan in now. And so let's talk about a little bit about these Broncos that got left out, right? So Tom Nalen, obviously, is one of my favorites. He's my now that Gradishar's in, he's my number one Bronco that should be in the Hall of Fame based on his merits. Followed by Carl Mecklenburg, very, very short, but he's in the senior pool. But Tom Nalen is probably the most egregious snub to not even make it to the semifinal list because of what he did in the NFL. And I've talked about it. You guys have heard me at length talk about his merits, but he's won. Jason Elam was on the nominee list. He didn't even get sniff, and usually special teams players don't. Al Wilson, Mark Schlereth, they were on the list, and those guys are borderline at best, I think. Although Mike Schlereth has a case, but players like Neil Smith, right? I mean, Neil Smith played for the Broncos for a couple of years. He's a Chief. I mean, you got to think of him as a Chief, but he did play for the Broncos. He was on there. He didn't get even on the list. I mean, you're putting a ton of wide receivers and running backs on that semifinal list, but you're totally ignoring or very, 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 I would say, minimal amount of players at other positions. Just it's a head scratcher to me when you think about it. So it's one of those things where I just don't think that they put much thought into it again. I just don't think they put much thought into it. But Neil Smith, right? Like I don't understand why he's not even there. And the same with Kevin Williams. I mean, those guys are some of the top during their game. I mean, Neil Smith was thought of as one of the best edge rushers during his career, at least for a few years in there. And then he was influential in that first Super Bowl victory for the Broncos. Very influential. I don't think he played as much of a role the second time, but he's still a two-time Super Bowl winner. And you've got Anquan Boldin, who I think was the number 2 receiver all the time on his team. He was almost always the second best wide receiver on his team. And he were rewarding longevity, right? Now, I don't mind rewarding longevity for someone like Frank Gore. Never super exceptional, but he's the third in career yardage, right? For a running back. I mean, that's pretty impressive for a running back to stick around that long and get that many yards. I can understand why you would put him in because of his longevity and where he sat. But just because someone's been there for a long time and is like ranked 14th, 15th, or even 27th, that doesn't do anything for me. So it's interesting that those are the choices that are being made. Gonna grab Pearl Heater saying good morning. Good morning, Pearl Heater. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. And then Keith Brugman's got a question here about, do we know who the single media representative is for the Denver Broncos in regards to the Hall of Fame? Yeah, it's Jeff Legwold, I believe, is the kind of the rep for him. And from what I understand, he's really pushed for some Broncos players in the past. I watched a little bit of his speech for Steve Atwater. I wasn't really impressed with his ability to deliver the reasons why he should be in the Hall of Fame. It wasn't really compelling, but he still was out there doing it. So you got to give him props for being out there. So it's Jeff Legwold. But the problem is you got one person here, pushing for the Broncos, when you've got 3, 4, 5 others that are in a, near New York who watched a lot of the, players from New York and Buffalo and those areas, Philadelphia. Those guys and gals are have a bigger voice because there's just more of them. And Gary Fire's coming in. Steve Atwater having to wait 15 years to get in is evidence of the Broncos' bias. Yeah, I mean, he waited for a while, but he's in. So whether you're in, in year 15 or you're in year 1, it doesn't make a difference once you're in. So it's one of those things where I'm happy that he's in. They do seem to, but then you got Champ Bailey, who was first ballot Hall of Famer, right? John Elway, first ballot Hall of Famer. So there's some that didn't have to wait. And, there's, I don't want to, belittle too much the Hall of Fame because it is a very hard process, right? It is hard to pick the greatest players of all time. And there's fans out there, everybody's team, I'm sure everybody, well, maybe not the Pittsburgh Steelers fans, but pretty much everybody else are saying, hey, we're getting snubbed by not having this player in or that player in. I mean, the Raiders have a ton of players in, and they're always complaining about, Lester Hayes not being in or, whatever. So I think every fan base probably feels like they're being snubbed to to some degree, but the Broncos have a big case. I went back before a lot of these players started getting in, and I looked at, the number of Hall of Famers based on the wins of the franchise from the merger, and looked at the players who got in that played after the merger, and the ratio of Broncos into the Hall of Fame was so tiny compared to everybody else based on their wins. And let's face it, teams win because of talent, not because they have a collection of okay players. Teams win because they have talented players, and they should be represented in the Hall of Fame. Now that they've gotten a few in, like Champ Bailey recently, and now Gradishar's in, and Pat Bolin's in, it's not the same anymore. So it's a little bit different. But back in the day, yeah, they ignored him for sure. Yeah, and Jeremy Sean's coming in, saying, I remember Woody Page's speech for John Elway. He stood up and said, "Gentlemen, John Elway," and sat back down. Yeah, he didn't need much of a what I would say speech to talk about how great he is. Everybody knew it, and everybody's going to put him in first ballot. But I'll say some of these other players do need that, right? Some of these other players need to be talked about because, and my 2 criteria, and this is why I keep talking about, there's players that are first ballot Hall of Famers. There's no need to even worry about. You don't have to discuss them. They get in. Lawrence Taylor, John Elway, Peyton Manning. These people just get in. But there's others who were very good that need a discussion. And the 2 things that I talk about is, were they ever considered the best at their position when they played, and did they have a lasting impact on the game of the NFL? If you can meet those 2 criteria, you should definitely at least be talked about and be considered for the Hall of Fame and really be pushed for the Hall of Fame. And I think Tom Nalen fits in that mold. I don't think Al Wilson does. I love Al Wilson, great player. I think if he'd have stuck around longer, maybe he had a better case. But Mark Schlereth, he has a case because of that, right? Because the 2 offensive lines, iconic offensive lines that he was on, 3 Super Bowls, one of the best guards probably during at least a portion of his career. So that's why he has a case. So yeah, that's the one where I feel like it's doing an injustice to a lot of the players by just looking down the career stats list and picking players. Have a conversation about some of these offensive linemen. Have a conversation about some of these defensive linemen that don't have stats to back up why they should be in the Hall of Fame. It's easy to look at stats. It's easy, right? You look at stats. Oh, well, he's number 17 on the list. We should probably think about getting him in. That's easy. Talk about players in a different light. Remove the stats and talk about their impact on the field. And that will require work. That will require actually talking to other people that watch them play or going back and looking at film. Facebook user coming in saying, "Morning, Tom. Benjamin here, commenting from Portland, Oregon, traveling for work. Keep up the good work and go Broncos." Thank you very much. I used to live in Portland, and it's a beautiful city. Oregon's a beautiful state, so have fun while you're out there. Thank you for coming in this morning. And Keith Brugman's coming back in saying it would be interesting to put all the data of every player in a database and see who AI would select for the Hall of Fame. Thoughts? Yeah, I don't know what data you would put in. Like how do you put in some of the data that is technique? How do you put in Tom Nalen's technical skills being better than everybody else? I mean, I guess you could say you could rank them. It'd be tough. It would be tough, but uh, I don't know if it needs to go that route. I think the selectors need to be a little bit more thoughtful in bringing in more positions in instead of so many of this high stats players, quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, defensive backs who, oh, they've got a lot of interceptions. Let's bring them in. It's one of those things where I think they can just tweak the process maybe a little bit, have a little bit more conversation, and then I think it would be better. Jeremy Sean's coming in saying they need John Elway giving a speech for Tom Nalen. I think it would hit more. Yeah, I do, but at the same time as I think they dismiss a lot of the players who played with some of these guys. I think if you could get somebody from the opposing team that played them a lot to give a speech for Tom Nalen and about how good he was. I mean, they probably talk about him being a dirty player, but to talk about how good he was, I think that would be more impactful. So if you found a defensive tackle from, the Raiders or the Chargers or the Chiefs that they played, against constantly to give a speech would be very, very influential. And then Gary Farr's coming back in with a great name, one of the most underrated players in NFL history, in my opinion. Simon Fletcher, he says, with 97.5 sacks and the consecutive games with a sack record at 10 that stood for many years. Yeah, Simon Fletcher was just completely ignored when he played. And I think one of his years, I can't remember which one it was. I think it was 1992, was good enough. If you look at what he did to even get defensive player of the year recognition, at least talk about him in the process, but he didn't even get a Pro Bowl, never made a Pro Bowl. And that's the problem, without an award, a Pro Bowl award or an All Pro award, they won't even let you nominate him. So even though he was an excellent player and, was impactful when it came to pass rush, and if he was playing in today's game doing that, he would be a first ballot Hall of Famer probably. And the same with Rulon Jones. I think Rulon Jones just played in the wrong era. Had he played in today's game, he would be in the same thing. But unfortunately, like Howard Griffith, I think he was one of the best, I think if not the best fullback at blocking of all time. And he can't even get nominated because he never received an award. But, fullbacks hardly ever got all pro awards. Once in a while, they would get an all pro award in this kind of more modern era, not the fullbacks that were actually running backs like Jim Brown, but once they started becoming more blockers and more pass catchers, they don't make it very often. So he can't even get a nomination. So you don't even have the discussion. And that's where Simon Fletcher sits, right or wrong. That's kind of how they're doing. All right, we're going to grab Tyler Brooks here saying, just wanted to say what you all do, Tom, is such a blessing to us Broncos fans. Thank you very much. Lost my dad end of May from CHF, and you really help lighten my day with the team coverage. Thank you. Well, I'm glad that I can bring that to you, Tyler, and I really I'm sorry for your loss. My condolences. Thank you for being here, and I'm glad that you like the show and like to listen to me. I don't know if many people do, but I'm glad that you do, and I'm glad that it makes your day better. So thank you very much, Tyler. I really appreciate it. That's a very, very nice compliment. Thank you. All right, I'm gonna again look through here and see if there's any more Facebook stars. If I'm missing it, being here by myself, it isn't. I get to talking and I forget to look at the list. So, yeah, if I miss you, I apologize, but I really do appreciate everybody being here this morning and listening to me kind of rant about the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I know we haven't really we're so busy talking about the Broncos resurgence and that they're in the playoff hunt in the first time in a long time, and they look like they have a better team, turned it around. We kind of forgot about the Broncos being left off, and not just I mean, Every Bronco was left off of this list this time for the Hall of Fame. Even the ones that just came for a couple years and were impactful on the team while they were here, but maybe were somewhere else. None of them even got a sniff for the Hall of Fame this year, and we kind of forgot about it. So I think we need to talk about it, and I really don't want this, these selectors to think that I think they're terrible. I think it's a tough job. And I just want them to be more thoughtful when it comes to this selection process. Go talk about players who don't have stats and really discuss their merits. And if you don't think they're deserving, okay, fine. But get them onto the semifinal list so that you can have those discussions and move forward. That we don't need to see the 27th best wide receiver in the Hall of Fame. We need to see the 8th best defensive tackle or the 12th best center. At least have those discussions. So that's what I'm saying. So thank you for sitting here and ranting with me. Appreciate it. Keith Brugman saying, we all appreciate you, Thomas. Have a great weekend. Go Broncos. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Keith. Yeah, I definitely, I'm definitely looking forward to the weekend. I'm looking forward to this Texans game, man. I am really looking forward to this Houston Texans game. The Broncos, I think, can go down there and win. I think their offense can really come alive. So let's hope that they can actually do that. But tomorrow night, Ron White and I are going to be on Orange and Blue View talking about the pregame show, doing a pregame show, talking about all the stuff that you need to hear. So tune into that show if you want a little bit more on the on what the Broncos need to do to win. Also check out Luke Patterson's article on keys to victory. It'll be coming out of Mile High Huddle today. I'll have one, my by the numbers will be coming out. So there's other information that we can really talk about the game. So I do want to just grab this. We're talking about the Three Amigos real quick. Gary Fire, the Three Amigos are Hall of Fame at my house. And Jeremy Shawn still has his Three Amigos t-shirt when he was probably 7 or 8. That's awesome, man. It was great. The Three Amigos, it was so fun to talk about them, but Ricky Natil just kind of like fell off. He was good for a while and then just kind of disappeared. I think Jackson was probably the best out of all three, really, when it comes to receiving, but Vance Johnson has a case as well. I still have a lot of the old stuff from my day. I mean, I've got this old banner just sitting here. I'll probably put up. I got John Elway poster. Got a lot of things that I had when I was a kid. Didn't get a whole lot back there, but when I could save my money up, I would buy some. So I love seeing old memorabilia from the Broncos from back in the day. Not like retro stuff, but like real vintage stuff is always fun. So, all right. Well, I'm gonna wrap this show up by grabbing Michael Ronquillo saying, "Great show today, Thomas, on Legends of Mile High. Go Broncos." Thank you, Michael. Thanks for being here. Thank you to everybody for being here this morning. And again, thank you for letting me rant about the Pro Football Hall of Fame snubbing the Broncos this year. And hopefully next year, we'll see a little bit more discussion about some of these deserving players. And I really hope to see Mike Shanahan, being a real choice, someone that they think about for that contributor position. So thank you very much. Have a great day, Broncos fans, and we will see you next Friday.